In 2003, a young man by the name of Boyd Taylor started building a secret structure inside his bedroom. After work every day, he would walk straight to his bedroom, lock the door behind him, and start working on this secret structure. After the first 2 days, his dad walked down to his room, knocked on his door and asked, "Son, I've been hearing all this noise coming from your bedroom. It seems like you're working on a project. May I see it?" Boyd kept quiet for a while and then he said, "I'm sorry Dad, I can't show it to you right now, but I promise you'll see it when I'm done." For 3 good months, Boyd kept building this mysterious structure inside his bedroom. One day, his dad got really frustrated about all the noise and his son's refusal to reveal what he was building. He walked down to Boyd's room again, this time determined not to leave until he saw what Boyd was building. He knocked on the door severally, and when Boyd did not respond, he got mad and broke down the door, walked into the room expecting to see the structure his son was building. But what he saw as soon as he lifted his head up made him break down in tears. 36-year-old Boyd was living with his divorced dad in the north of England. Both of them owned a small construction firm, and so their daily routine involved stepping out every morning to build or carry out maintenance on houses in the area. Usually, when they returned from work, Boyd would spend time with his dad, either watching TV or gisting about things that happened during the day. It was a routine that had brought them together over the years. But one day, Robert noticed that his son was withdrawing into himself. He no longer spent time with him after work or went out to hang out with his friends. Instead, he would just hole up in his room until it was time to go out for work in the morning. Robert understood that Boyd was an introvert, but this time things seemed really different. He was worried and he hoped his son would find a new hobby or make new friends that would bring him out of his shell. One evening, as Robert was making his way to the living room, he heard an unusual sound coming from Boyd's bedroom. So he stopped and leaned closer to the door, and just then he heard sounds of hammering and sawing echoing from within. He knocked on the door and asked to be let in, but Boyd did not open the door. He simply said, "I'm working on a woodworking project, Dad. Please, I'll come out when it's done." And Robert was like, "Okay son, I want you to know I'm here for you. Call me if you ever need help with your project." And after that, he just walked away. For the next few days, Boyd continued to lock himself indoors right after he returned from work. Then one day in early December, he approached his dad with one request: to take a 1-month break from work so he could focus and complete his woodworking project. His dad looked at him and took a moment to think about it. It was mostly just the both of them that handled all the building and maintenance works they received through their construction firm. So letting his son take a month off would mean he would have to handle all the work himself or possibly hire additional help. But then on second thought, Robert was happy that his son had found a hobby that would pull him out of his moody state. So he told Boyd, "You know what? Take the month off, and if you need extra time, feel free to let me know." Early the next morning, as Robert was leaving for work, he heard Boyd already hammering and sawing away. And when he returned in the evening, Boyd was still in his room working on the project. It was as if he had been working on it non-stop. This went on every single day throughout the entire month of December. Then on the first day of January, Boyd approached his dad and told him he had something to tell him. Robert instantly became excited. His son had finally completed his secret woodworking project and he was finally going to get to see it. But Boyd had something else to say. He explained to his dad that he was almost done with the project now and needed just 2 more weeks to finalize everything. His dad, as always, was understanding and supportive. He simply said, "Alright, take your time, and remember, if you need anything, don't forget to ask." Boyd thanked him and returned to his room, locked the door and continued hammering what he was working on. He started spending even more time in his room. It seemed as if he was racing against a very tight deadline. Over the next week, Robert would occasionally approach his son's bedroom door and ask, "Hey son, how's the project going? Can I come in and take a look?" But Boyd's response remained consistent. "No dad, I'm almost done now. Don't worry, you'll see it once it's done." This went on for an entire week. Then on the evening of January 7th, Robert knocked on Boyd's bedroom door again. He had been watching TV in the living room and began to feel sleepy, so he decided to stop by and check in on his son before heading to bed. By now, Robert had come to terms with the fact that his son was never going to show him his little secret project until it was complete. So from behind the door, he just said, "I'm off to bed, son. See you tomorrow." Afterward, he walked to his room, climbed into his bed and closed his eyes. But at around 3:30 a.m, a loud crashing sound woke him up. The noise was so loud that Robert thought the chimney in the living room had collapsed. In panic, he jumped out of bed and hurried to the living room to check it out, but everything seemed to be okay, so he decided to return to bed. On his way back, he paused at Boyd's bedroom door and pressed his ear against it to find out if his son was still awake. But everywhere was quiet, so he thought to himself, Boyd must be fast asleep. So with that assumption, he proceeded back to his room, crawled into his bed and slept throughout the night. The following morning, Robert got up early and prepared for work, and just as he was about to leave, he realized that there was no hammering or sawing sounds coming from his son's room. He thought that was odd because for several weeks the noise had been constant. So he walked into the hallway, stopped by Boyd's bedroom door and cheerfully greeted, "Good morning, son. How is everything going in there? I'm about to leave for work." When he didn't get any response, he reasoned that Boyd was likely still asleep since he had gone to bed quite late the previous night. So he stepped out of the house, hopped into his car and drove away. When he returned home later that evening, he immediately sensed that something was off. And then he realized it was how quiet the house was. Normally, he would hear the sound of his son hammering and sawing wood as soon as he stepped out of the car. Wondering what was going on, he dropped his bag in the living room and walked towards Boyd's room, calling his name along the way, but there was no response. When he got to his room door, Robert knocked persistently, continuing to call out, but there was still no response. Frustration and worry started to creep in slowly. He reached for the doorknob and tried to open it, but it was locked. At this point, Robert's heart started to beat hard. He tried to recall if he had seen Boyd's car parked outside when he arrived home, but he wasn't quite sure. So he rushed out of the house to confirm, and he saw that the car was parked outside. This meant that Boyd had to be in the house, so he rushed back to his bedroom door, growing increasingly worried. He called out Boyd's name repeatedly, but there was still no response. Robert was so worried at this point he said, "Son, I'm going to force my way in if you don't open this door right this moment." Then he pressed his ear against the door, listening for any sign of movement, but the room remained silent. Determined to do the very thing he had been holding himself back from doing for months, he walked to the garage, grabbed the hammer and returned to Boyd's bedroom door. He called out to Boyd one last time, and when he didn't get a reply, he began swinging the hammer at the door. After a few solid strikes, the doorknob fell off and Robert pushed the door open. But to his greatest surprise, Boyd was nowhere to be seen. There was just his bed, a study table and a wardrobe tucked in a corner, precisely how he remembered it from the last time he had been in the room. But on closer observation, Robert noticed something unusual about the room. He realized that Boyd had made a partition within his room, complete with its own door. It was like a sub-room within the main room. Robert tried to open this new door, but it was also locked. So he picked up his hammer, and after a few strikes, the doorknob fell off and he pushed the door open. But as soon as he raised his head up and saw what his son had been building for the past 3 months and what he had used it to do, Robert sank to the ground and started to cry. After a few minutes, he regained his composure, rushed out of Boyd's room and dialed the police. Boyd had constructed a very unusual device. It consisted of thick pieces of wood, an electric jigsaw, a timing device, ropes, and a hefty rock. The sturdy structure was shaped like a door frame, but it was much bigger. It measured 8 foot tall and 3 foot wide. In between this frame, there was a thin but heavy and razor-sharp sheet of metal that was suspended by a rope. The rope was wrapped around the hefty rock on the floor, while the electric jigsaw was positioned such that its blade was just making contact with the rope. After Boyd had completed the project the night before, he prepared an inflatable air mattress and positioned it exactly beneath the device he had built. Then he turned on the timer switch which he had connected to the jigsaw and double-checked to confirm if everything was perfectly in place. Once he had confirmed it was all set, he swallowed 12 sleeping pills. Then he laid down on the air mattress facing the ceiling, his gaze fixed to the device that was now directly above him. Then he kept adjusting until he was sure he had aligned perfectly with the device. After that, he just kept staring at the device directly above him until the effects of the sleeping pills kicked in and he fell asleep. The timer device he had turned on before taking the sleeping pills had been set to go off by 3:30 a.m. So, as soon as the clock struck 3:30 a.m., the timer device went off, activating the electric jigsaw which started to cut through the rope. As soon as the rope snapped, it released a sharp metal sheet that Boyd had positioned above his head. The metal sheet fell onto his throat and went right through it, killing him instantly. Boyd's woodworking project was a guillotine, a device invented in the 1700s to carry out public executions. Although he didn't leave a note behind, his dad believes the reason he took his own life was because he couldn't get over the divorce of his parents, which took place when he was just 15. So, that's the end of the story, guys. If you would like to hear more stories like this, be sure to give me a follow. And don't forget to hit the like button and let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you.